let's go into the topic of the week, which we're going to just talk about non-binary, right? What is it? What is it to Kay? What is it in general? How does it shape our community? How is it coming into play? I'm sure this conversation is going to go into other things. So let's start there. Kay, what would be your definition, meaning to you, what is non-binary?
Yeah, so in a very literal sense, binary just means two. And we're saying non-binary, we're literally saying like, none of these two options that you're giving to me work for me. So I am none of these two. I am beyond these two things, right? Non is pretty self-explanatory, right? So non. Right. So you're like a combination. You're neither. And by the binary, we're talking about gender. So in this case, man or woman. And you're saying, I reject those two things, and I'm not exclusively one or the other. I may be a combination of both. I may be beyond this whole thing. And so I think for each person, the definition varies, but I think on a very like macro technical level, you're just rejecting this idea that there's, two genders or two sexes assigned at birth, male or female, man or woman.
And how does that work with gender expression?
Yeah. So with gender expression and being non-binary, I think that just means that you're not limited to any traditional ideas of, what you need to wear, who you are. You are in a space of exploration. Unfortunately, for non-binary people, when you express yourself the ways that you want to, and it, doesn't conform with what society has been doing or what you've been seeing, it can bring about violence. And we face disproportionate violence as gender nonconforming people. We know that trans women, especially Black trans women, face the most violence, but that's a combination of gender identity and gender expression. But for like non-binary people, there's absolutely violence that we're facing. In general, hate crimes are up for a variety of different marginalized identities. So by race, by gender, we know that trans people face disproportionate violence. So wearing what you want to wear comes with a price.
That's very true. And I don't know if my memory's not serving me well, or feel free if you want to bypass this topic, but I think I remember you undergoing a hate crime about last year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can you speak to maybe a little bit about that, if you're comfortable? If not, we can pass.
Sure. I was very public about a lot of things that have happened to me. And one of them was, facing hate crime violence. So I wrote an article for it on RaceBaiter, and I was very public with the hate crime. So there's actually two that I've been a part of, or I've been a survivor of this year, and I wrote about both of them. One was at the Philadelphia Trans Wellness Conference, which is the largest trans conference country, if not the world. We had these right-wing extremists who showed up in front of the venue. And they were out there to target and harass people, and they ended up hurting people. So they punched me in the nose, they pepper sprayed 2 Black queer femmes. So that was in August of last year, so just about a year ago today, or this week. And then in New York, in November, I was at a concert, mostly white crowd. It was a white artist. I was there with a trans white man who's a friend of mine. And, at concerts, there's a lot of pushing, shoving. White people, especially white men, they just don't care. They take up space as they do. And I got into it with a bunch of white people. So it was this like lesbian couple and this like white man. And they were just saying stuff about my gender and also gender expression. I would say it isn't just clothing, but it's also like your attitude. Like you just, and for me as like a non-conforming person, gender non-conforming, like I take that very literally. It just means that like I'm not here to conform, to cater to you. I'm gonna be here, and in this case it was a concert, and I'm not gonna be shoved and pushed, and I'm not just gonna let you have your way all the time, like not today. And then that just brought about violence. And so, I got stitches, my eyes, my left eye. And after that, I was very public about it, did some fundraising, because at the time I didn't have health insurance. And I wasn't like fully employed. I was like freelancing and stuff. And so I was like really scared. I didn't know what my medical bills were going to be like. You know, I refused an ambulance because that can be thousands of dollars. Took an Uber to the ER in New York. And that was right before the Jussie Smollett hate crime incident happened. And so, you know, I was kind of raising awareness for what happened to me, and then that happened, and it just became a bigger conversation. But in general, I would just say that what I learned from that was that I was not prepared physically for like hand-to-hand combat. Like I work out, whatever, and that's a different thing to know how to like defend yourself. Self-defense is not exercise. Like that's a skill that people need to develop. Like you have to learn how to like protect yourself if something happens. And so as soon as I got my stitches out, I've thrown myself into boxing. I've been boxing as a way to like reclaim that trauma, boxing as a way to teach myself how to defend myself. I actually just came from a kickboxing class here in Oakland. And so I've been really like serious about that and telling people, you know, like this can happen to you. It's not a matter of like, could this happen to you? But it's that it might happen to you. And like, how do you protect yourselves when you're out? Like, we got to go out thinking that something could happen to us and be prepared for that. And then lastly, something I've been doing, you know, I've heard of other Black trans masculine people in particular, Black trans men. One was in Pittsburgh. His name is Zaire Martinez, and someone else outside of Austin, Texas, Kair Rice. And they're both Black trans men, and they survived really serious hate crimes. Like they were hospitalized, broken bones, all this stuff. They couldn't work. They got outed at work. And because of my visibility and the way that people responded and helped me, I tried to get my network to help them. And we were able to fundraise for them and like cover some of their basic expenses immediately. So I've been trying to pay it forward because people helped me.
So like, what is it that allows you to continue being who you are, you know, unapologetically? Because when you realize that your safety could be on the line almost at any moment, you know, that might make someone, you know, go back into the closet, so to speak. So like, what is it for you that keeps you standing, you know, right in the spotlight?
Yeah, well, I'm telling you that I'm not trying to be in the spotlight. These things happen, and I decide that rather than being quiet about it, you know, I want to share my story, share my experiences. And with this hate crime stuff, like people from all over the world reached out to me, my friends too, to tell me, you know, this has happened to me too. Like my close personal friends who are masculine, trans men, or just masculine folks in general, you know, would say, you know, this has happened to me. And like, I never shared it with anybody because I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. And so it started a conversation. And I guess for me, like at this point in my life, like, I'm just not going backwards. Like, I don't think that that's going to help myself. It's going to help anyone. I recognize my privilege and that I can do that. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, especially in this political moment, like this Trump administration, they are very much trying to target the trans community. They're not trying to, they are targeting the trans community. They have targeted us. And so I think now more than ever, for those of us who can be visible and vocal to do so, as we're in like a larger fight. So for me, you know, also the possibility model thing, you know, like I really want to be myself, and by doing that, I think it is inspiring other people, especially younger generations and older generations. And these are other people who, by standing in their truth and putting themselves at risk, they've allowed me to be who I am. So I just feel like we're all in this together.
I love that. You had mentioned something about you don't want to go backwards. No irony here, but I'm going to ask you to go backwards for a bit, because I'm curious about, you know, your several, I guess they're not, I wouldn't call them, right word probably isn't transitions, but in a sense, like the coming out stages, because I would imagine, and I could be wrong, Kay, that you didn't begin saying that you were non-binary, right? So could you tell us a bit about how that journey was?
Yeah. So for me, well, let me just start by saying that like trans people have always existed from the beginning of time, all over the world. Right. So my family is from Ecuador, which is in South America. There's a rich history of third genders in Ecuador, in South America, in Latin America, in Mexico. Right. And so, and in the US, we know indigenous folks like Two-Spirit people. So how I've always felt about myself, like I never really felt particularly girly or feminine. but I never wanted to be a man. I just wanted to be myself. I want to cut my hair. I want to wear these clothes. I want to act this way. I don't want to change anything about myself. I just don't rock with society telling me I have to do these things in this way. Like, I'm gonna be myself. I don't care. And it's always been me. So from the time I was born, I hated dresses. I hated long hair. My mother really tried, but I was like, no, Ma, sorry. And I was always like this tomboyish type of person. So that's always been inherent. And I think that's part of the magic of like trans non-binary people, especially Black and brown trans non-binary people, because it's such a part of you. It's like inherent in you that, you know, where does it come from? It's from your ancestors. It's like magic, right? And then it's not like you get awarded or rewarded by society for being this way. If anything, it's 4 times harder to be this type of person. And it's like, it's not a choice. This is who we are. And so I feel like for me, it's just being authentic. But to your point, your question, I didn't have language for it. So I had never seen any non-binary people before, or not anybody that was out. I've never seen any trans people before that were out. I'm sure they were there, but I didn't know who they were. I didn't know that I could be like this. I didn't know this was an option. I didn't know there were other people who felt this way. And I guess and I was always in Catholic school too. And so queer things, like gender variant things, were not talked about, not supported at all, admonished, punished even, right? And so not until I got to college, when I met my first like white lesbians on my basketball team, where I was like, oh, okay, like being not straight isn't like a rare thing. There are other people who feel this way too. I'm not the only one. And then not until later in my life, when I moved out to California a couple years ago to Oakland, that I started meeting queer and trans Black and brown people specifically, because in Boston, it's like way white, super white. And so having our spin on it really changed it. And then getting this language, where I was like, okay, so I'm not just a lesbian. Like, I don't even know if I rock with the idea of being a woman or a lesbian anymore. So I was like, so what does it mean to be trans? And I started meeting non-binary people and masculine people. And then I was like, oh, those words actually fit me better than the words I've been using, which were lesbian and she, her pronouns. And I used a different name that I didn't really like. So then I guess it's this combination of being more secure in myself and then seeing other possibility models and learning this language. And the language part is just hella elitist. Like, I always felt this way, but I didn't have words for it. So your lived experience is far more valid than like whether or not you have the words. Words are important, but you know how you feel.
So I always hear like interchange, is being non-binary and being genderqueer the same thing or not?
So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say yes or no.
Okay.
Talk about like the words and how I understand them to be.
Okay.
And so, you know, as we said with like non-binary, right? It's very clearly like I don't identify with man or woman or masculine or feminine, right? And then genderqueer to me is related in that you're saying, you know, you are complicating gender, right? You're queering gender, right? And that can be taken in any variety of ways. It could be like you could, you know, identify one way and say, you know, I'm genderqueer, and there's like a larger concept within it. So I feel like the two are related, but I think the differences might be where non-binary is like very specifically neither man or woman, and genderqueer I think may have some more flexibility with how you identify.
So genderqueer is more like an umbrella term.
I would say so.
Okay. And what type of advice? So I struggle with this all the time, and I'm trying so much to be better, especially being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm trying to be better at this. What kind of advice would you give someone to help them be better with using the correct pronouns?
Yeah, I think that first people should have a commitment for wanting to try it, right? Like, why is this important? Why does this matter? And in my case, you know, my name's Kay. I use they, them pronouns. That's my identity. That's who I am. And I mean, how would you like it if someone just kept calling you the wrong name or kept misgendering you and saying you were a gender that you weren't? Like, it doesn't feel good. It's disrespectful, right? And so I can't make somebody want to do that. I can't make somebody care. Either you care or you don't. And if you care, that's the baseline. So then you have to figure out for yourselves, well, like, where are my learning edges, right? Is like calling K by they, them, like a new thing for me. Maybe I should just keep calling them K and start working on the they them thing and working it in, or like practicing, or like whatever you need to do to make it work. Everybody has to learn differently on their own. So I guess my recommendations are, one, to like really ask yourself if you're trying to be a supportive person for trans non-binary people. And then what do you need to do, how you learn to make sure that you're getting your friends' pronouns correct, and that like mistakes or missteps will happen. Like I have also misgendered my friends. Like, you know, people change names, people change pronouns, and sometimes you just mess up. And then being able to work through when you mess up, right? Like, how do you apologize? How do you fix it? In general, when you misgender a trans person or a non-binary person, hopefully you catch it yourself. You'd be like, oh, okay, like, damn, Kay uses they, them pronouns, sorry. And you just keep it moving. Like, we don't want to make like a big deal out of it, especially if it's like in public. And then I appreciate that. Like, I know that, you know, it can be a new thing for some people, but if it keeps happening, and if the person who keeps doing it, like, just doesn't care and shows like no remorse, then it's not okay. Like, then you've reached a point for me where I'm like, I can't be around you. You actually are like harmful and hurtful for me. And unfortunately, misgendering people can be disregarded.
So I have one more question. I don't know what you have going on, but I have one more question I want to ask. So I struggle personally with the binary, like, I guess, groundwork or platform that exists within the LGBTQ community. I just think we have to do away with it completely. I don't understand the whole thing with like no stud on stud and like, oh, that's gay. And it's like, we're all queer. We're all gay, you know, like, so in general, like, I kind of see, you know, from my perspective, non-binary as just like, to me, the status quo of what queer people, how we should function. You know, we should do away with the whole thing about, you know, femmes can't dance with other femmes in the club. Like, what? Come on, like, all of this is silly. All of it is expression, right? Like RuPaul says, everything is drag, right? So, like, what, like, in your opinion, like, how do you feel about that? Like, as a person that identifies, like, this is how I identify, what do you think about our community and how we like almost are unwilling to let go of the standards that kind of oppress us? So how do you feel about that?
I agree with you, for sure. I wish that we didn't have marginalization and stigmas within a community that is already marginalized and stigmatized and oppressed and targeted and killed. Like, we don't have time for it. Like, we just really don't. But it exists. And, you know, to your other point about like people just holding on to what they know, I think that could be part of it. You know, like, how do you enter a space where we're saying like, there are no rules, wear whatever you want, do whatever you want, be whoever you want. And people, you know, kind of need some sort of framework to be like, oh, well, you know, I can't think like that. Like, I need some parameters. I need some rules. You know, even with like relationships, like, oh, okay, it's not monogamous anymore. You have multiple partners. Like, what's that? How do you do that? I think it's possible. Clearly, we're already doing it. You know, we're pushing boundaries, we're breaking binaries. We have legal recognition in some states. Some people have X markers on their licenses. So it's happening. It's going to be interesting and scary to see like the future of like legal things, lawsuits. I know on October 8th, there's a really big case going up to the Supreme Court. A trans woman is suing Starbucks. So I personally am kind of waiting with bated breath to see what happens there, where in this case, Starbucks very famously has announced that they are trying to be really supportive of the transgender community. And for any employee at Starbucks who's trans, who wants to go through gender affirmation surgery, Starbucks says they're going to cover it. If not all of it, a lot of it. And so, you know, they did that. And obviously now they have more trans employees or people who want to work there. However, they have this one case where it's this trans woman who was working at a Starbucks, and she's claiming that her manager, you know, was harassing her on the basis of her gender and being a trans woman, saying that, you know, she wasn't feminine enough and like misgendering her and then like retaliating against her. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see when this goes up to the Supreme Court in October, like, what will the court say about the treatment and harassment of trans people in the workplace? It's going to have really big impacts on everybody. So I don't know, to your point, right? Like, we don't have time. I wish that we would just gather ourselves and recognize that we have very serious challenges ahead of us. But there's homophobia and anti-Blackness and transphobia within our communities. There's racism. There's all these things, right? Misogyny. So we have a lot of work to do ourselves.
You're absolutely right. And it's like, I want to say, no, that's not true. But yeah, it totally exists. And day by day, step by step, as you said, what was it? What's the model that you said? The possibility model?
Possibility, yeah.
Possibility model. All right. We can start there.
Right. I mean, we all have to do the work. I have my own work to do, right? I have my own things that I've learned, that I've internalized, that I'm trying to be better about. So I don't think that anyone's perfect, but hopefully as a community, we are recognizing that we, have work to do, and we're also just under attack right now. So like, what are we doing to show up for ourselves and each other?
You brought up a lot of solid facts today, and I feel like I'm taking notes over here because I feel like I'm learning too. Like when you do panels and like you talk to, or you have like any YouTube or Instagram that people can follow you at and see what you're up to?
Yeah, totally. So on Instagram, the letter K_PMZ. I am on Facebook, as you said, KP Martinez. I'm on Twitter, the letter K, BOI Martinez. And I'm writing, every now and then things will pop up online. I was put on my Instagram link tree. So I have been writing, I consult, I do panels, and now as a consultant with Awaken, working with tech companies, talking about their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy.
Nice. Keep kicking ass.
Oh, thanks, that ambition, right? That queer ambition out here.
That's what we gotta do. I did have one personal question. Why are you considering the poly lifestyle?
Yeah, well, I have, for most of my life, been in monogamous exclusive relationships. So I was in like 2-3 year back-to-back relationships. And then I was like, okay, maybe that's a thing I should check in with myself about. And I, for the first time, met someone who was already in a polyamorous situation. And so that person introduced me to the concept. I really liked them. I loved them. I wanted to be with them. And I wanted to learn and see if this dynamic would work for me. So I'm definitely new to it. At the moment, I'm in like a polyamorous situation, so I'm exploring. I have a lot to learn. So I don't know. I mean, why I'm doing it. I mean, part of it is because it was introduced to me. I think theoretically it makes sense. And now I'm just trying to see if that's me, if I can make that work in my life.
I feel that. Soko's already diving into the poly lifestyle, has been for a while, but so I'm in a monogamous relationship and it's not going to happen. My partner is not interested in it, but I think it just makes complete sense personally. This is not this podcast, so we won't get into that. Another time we can talk about that. All right. So everyone, please follow K Martinez at K_PMZ. Also, we'll provide all the links that Kay mentioned just a few minutes ago. Kay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this, amplifying great stories out there. Appreciate it.